So hi everyone. This is a video just to help you build a barrel oven. And the best rocket-fired barrel oven I've ever seen built and built off is by Tim Barker. And there's a link there. And you can buy his book and other stuff. And so really this video isn't for you unless you've done that. So there are no details in here. All the details are in the book or in the video or in the plans. But there's a specific reason why I'm doing this video is because the oven in the book is too small if you want to bake a reasonable amount of bread or run a small micro bakery. And essentially the smallest oven you can run a micro bakery off is a 2-pan oven. And so this video kind of assumes you've bought the book and it gives you the adjustments that you need to make in order to make a 2-pan oven, but using obviously a rocket. And so that oven can hold at least 12 loaves. I use up to 18 loaves, smallish loaves that I use. And so that's what this is all about. So let's move on. So what did I change? So essentially I changed the size of the oven and made it deeper. So 650 mils deep, because a pan is actually 600 by 400. So to fit a 600 millimeter pan in, I've made the oven 650 mil deep, and that fits in the pan. And most bakers work with pans of that size, and things fit around that size, and even individual tins are made in that way. So actually you get 2 pans in. That's why it's called the 2-pan oven, because they're 2 shelves. But if you're not doing bread and you need less height, you could put 3 shelves in, especially if you're baking rolls. So I know for Saif in Mozambique, you're wanting 3 shelves, and you can quite easily fit 3 shelves in there to do that. So that's the thing we change, is basically the size of the oven. The rocket, well, I just built standard rockets because that's what I'm used to and it works better for me. The rocket in the book is really good. I think it just uses smaller bits of wood and it takes a little bit more effort. And the rocket I want bigger bits of wood to go in, because I want times where it burns slowly. And then when I want it to go up, I want to use smaller bits to get the temperature up. And the way this oven's designed is it sort of has a settled temperature of around 220 degrees if you just feed it with medium-sized wood. So that's kind of what I also did, was change the rocket, but that's a choice. And then also I use an extra barrel to do that. Not all of it, just bits and pieces of that. So you can look at buying 3 barrels instead of 2. And then also what I do is I use a smaller and square exhaust, 120 mil square exhaust, as opposed to, I think, 150 round exhaust. And the reason why I do this is because I've made the oven bigger. That back chamber behind the oven, everything has to fit there. And so I don't want to compromise on the 50 mil slot. And hence I have a smaller exhaust, and square, it works just fine. So that's something else I change. And then also just the front of the oven I've changed, because I don't want all the air to go out when I open the door. So I don't just cut the whole front of the barrel off. I cut a rectangle around the edges. There's pictures later, you can see that. And this helps with heat retention. Like if you're opening a door, the heat at the top of the oven is going to fly out. So having a little lip there makes a big difference, especially with baking bread. You want still slow heat. You don't want the oven jumping up and down. So that's it. And then lastly, the change I make is obviously I put sand, so does the others, but I put quite a lot of tiles in. So that makes the oven slow to heat up, but it gives you a consistent retained heat. Not just use unglazed ceramic tiles, and that's for baking bread. So I'll just go through each one of these changes. And yeah, if you have any queries, you can get hold of me at breadrev.com. Okay. So the first thing is, you can see, is I just move the 440 oven becomes 650, and that back chamber becomes 230 as opposed to 290. So that chamber at the back gets smaller, and then the oven changes. So there's just the basics of it. And I don't cut down that initial first barrel. I use the full barrel of 880. I noticed that they don't, and I do. And also remember, the one end of the barrel, I don't cut off the end. I only cut the end off the other barrel. So that's one of the things that I do. And that just gives you an idea of how it works. Then I build my own rocket. It's quite simple. It's 500 high, about 230 wide. There are so many different rockets you can get. This is a stock standard one. I think what's important here is that the actual gap, the actual inside of the rocket is at least 120 squared to maybe even 150 squared. And the reason for that is simply to get bigger pieces of wood in. So I'll have like 2 or 3 or 4 pieces of fairly biggish wood. I don't have to feed all the time. And that consistent burn and the height of the rocket being 500, it gives me the heat that I need. And with the sand on the bottom of the barrel, you don't have problems with burn through. It does mean if you over push this kind of rocket, you could really make it extremely hot, but that's not the idea. The idea is consistent heat when you're baking, and also not having to feed it all the time. So that's the rocket that I use. And then here you can just see this square. I use a square chimney, and you can see how it sits at the back of that first barrel. Yeah, and I don't think there's too much to learn there. The rest in the book, buy the book, and you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. So that's a simple thing. You get the height of the exhaust, etc., in the book and how it fits. Then just you need an extra barrel. There's a picture of a barrel, purely because I use 2 barrel ends at the back of the first barrel to make like an insulated end, and I use 2 barrel ends for the door. So that's 4 barrel ends plus that one, and there's 5 barrel ends, and therefore you need a 3rd drum. Also, you need an extra drum because of the length of the oven and the covering, and you covering a whole drum. You do need a couple of extra pieces that you won't get out of the second drum either. So yeah, so that's it. You use an extra barrel. And then here's just how I cut the rectangle in the front. And the reason that I do that, you can see, is the lips at the top, and not so much the bottom, but specifically that lip at the top is very important. And it just means that space, and you don't need more than that. If you can see with the 2 shelves, you can put stuff in, and with the 3 shelves, you know, it's plenty of space to put that in. If you're worried about space, you could cut the bottom slightly lower, and then I just put the oven door on top of that. So that's what I do. And then lastly, I think, is bakers bake on a falling temperature, you know, and it's not like making pizzas where you just pump it as hot as you want. You want even, consistent heat that's slowly dropping off, hence the bigger bits of wood and the steady burn. And then you increase it towards the end of the bake. So you need that consistent still heat. And so therefore I chuck lots of tiles in the bottom on top of the sand. And then I put tiles on each shelf. You can make the shelves with thinner metal. That was just metal I had, and that gives you bigger gaps. So I was only needing 2 shelves, but if you're going to do 3 shelves, use as thinner metal as you can and make it fit. And the book has a different way of doing the shelves, possibly a better way, but I like the fact that you can take the shelves out and put them back in again. So that's why I do it like this. And they fit in through the gap there. And then on the right there, you can actually just see some, I can put 9 in a shelf of those ovens. And you can see sort of the pan size. So that's really the basics of it. You know, if you seriously about building a good oven, get the book, watch the video, get the plans, and build one. Ovens cost a lot of money. You can see there's a picture of me with the oven that we've designed and built. That oven costs 11,500. In South Africa, I can build the barrel oven for about a third of that, like 3,000 rand, 3,500 rand. And even less if you're looking for extra bits and you use scrap and you don't use fiber, you use clay for insulation. So there's lots of different ways that you can really build these barrel ovens, and they're perfectly good and they're the same size as those manufactured ovens. So yeah, I mean, we do build bigger ones occasionally, and they start at about 35,000 up to 50,000, but we're not building much of those anymore post-COVID. And I would really only make those for people that have already had a barrel or a small oven and are needing to then up their game a bit and already have a track record, or at some stage we'll get the plans and maybe sell them as well. But for now, too much else to do. Just remember, we bakers, we're not oven builders. So I hope that's sufficient info, and it'll all make sense if you have the book and the video, and that's get off to permacultureprinciples.com and sort yourself out. As I said, again, you can go onto the Bread Rev website. There's a contact there. You can contact me if you have any specific questions. Thanks, Emil.